drop some verse or something like that on Daz's stuff on the dog food. And Daz was always like, "Yeah, that's my engineer right there, man. He's tight, and all this stuff." And Snoop was finally like, "Hey, man, you want to be my engineer?" And I was like, "Sure. I mean, I'll be all your engineers." you know, I just wanted to be working a lot.
It's gainful employment, right?
Yeah, and they seemed nice to work with and everything. No one was a problem. I didn't understand why everyone was scared to work with them and all. I wasn't scared to work with them. They were really nice. It was fun. We played video games sometimes, all that stuff. It was fun.
This is a Jmix exclusive.
Did that ever change over time as, the popularity got more and more, the egos got more and more? Did you ever see that change at all?
Not with Snoop or Dog Pound or any of that camp. No, I mean, I think Pac was a little more, I'd say, egotistical than Snoop. Really was, and I think that he was a lot different than Snoop. Where Snoop would roll up 5 blunts and take a hit and pass it all around. And Pac would roll a blunt and take like 10 hits, and then he'd pass what was left over. So it was just a different vibe. It wasn't like, Pac was a dick or nothing. It was just that he was just different than Snoop. Snoop's always been really generous, really cool and everything. So, of course, I hit it off right away with Snoop, you know. And, Pac was fun in the studio. He would always bag on people and do all this stuff. And it was fun, it was a fun environment, but it was just a lot different than with Snoop. So when I was doing some Snoop albums over there, and I was working on Dogfather and a couple things after, and he was like, "I'd like my live sound to be as good as my studio sound." And he said, "You want to go on the road with me and do my concerts?" And I was like, that sounds good. I knew it was going to take me out of the studio a little bit, but I had already been seasoned because I had to make money doing live shows through college and stuff, so I already knew how to do that. And I was like, sure, man, I can't pass up, uh, you know, going on the road with Snoop all around the world. I think our first trip was like a world tour, the first one I took, you know. So, yeah, I was seeing all these different countries, all these different places, and it was pretty cool. And, at the same time, like I said, Snoop and I had a great relationship. So it wasn't like I was just riding a crew bus and having to deal with all the roadies and this and that. I was riding with Snoop on his bus. We're in the back blowing and playing Xbox the whole trip to the next place. And so it made it a lot cooler. It was more like, it's more like a family environment or something. It felt a lot closer than a lot of tours I would imagine would be, you know.
You even went with him when he went to No Limit.
Yeah, yeah. I still did stuff over No Limit, and we still did a lot of concerts. Actually, I remember C Murder. I mixed his concert for him because I was already there. C Murder's like, man, I want my shit to sound good too, you know. I was like, I got you. And his show was only like 15 minutes or something like that. I was like, I'll just charge you half what I'm charging Snoop. And he's like, that's cool. And he paid me in cash every night at the end. And I was like, this is great.
That's a great gig.
Yeah, yeah, this was great. So I would be doubling it up on the road there. And then No Limit thing was pretty cool. I liked a lot of those guys.
I
I did Cain and Abel's album.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff through my years, man.
I seen you make a cameo in the Dog Named Snoop video from the Bone soundtrack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd get into those things every now and then, slide into a video here and there.
Yeah, I think you're leaving the store with a bag of chips.
Bag of chips, right? Like I was stealing it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I remember that.
One question about death row. Everybody talks about the negative aspect of death row. It's a two-part question. How was your relationship with Suge Knight? And the second part of that would be, did you get any positive experience from interaction with him?
Yeah, I got a ton. I didn't have problems with Suge. Every time I saw Suge, he was jovial, running around laughing, you know, counting his hundreds of millions of dollars he had made, you know. He was always in a good mood. When I saw him, I had heard stories about when he wasn't and stuff, but for me, he was always great. And, you know, I did get a lot out of it. I mean, I got a lot of great credits out of it. I got, you know, a nice bankroll out of that whole situation. But besides that, I mean, just watching Suge in action, it was just a trip to see how he would maneuver people into what he wanted, you know. I mean, some people might call it bullying, but some people might call it being really assertive, you know. But he seemed to get what he wanted, you know, by just asking for it. And whether it was him being huge or I don't know what it quite was or the way he asked, but, you know, usually people would just say, yeah, you know.
Do you think people are just naturally intimidated of him?
I think there was definitely an intimidation factor there. Whether he asserted it or not was kind of, you know, dependent on the situation. I don't think he constantly was like, you know, in fact, nobody was constantly like G'd up all the time, you know? Nobody's like always ready to kill somebody or always ready to beat somebody up or always ready to, you know, do this or that. They're all pretty, they're nice guys, you know? Everybody I was in the studio with was a nice guy until you went the other route and maybe flipped his switch or said something funny to him or, you know, but I didn't say too much, you know, man. I was just there doing my job, making people's stuff sound great. I never had those problems. Never. You know? And Suge, he, you know, he'd sign my checks and I mean, we were all good. He was up here one time, you know, up here at the studio. That was a long time later.
There seems to be this public image that at the studio, a bunch of gang guys hanging around, and it was always this, you know, embattled environment. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you get productive if it's going to be like
Because it wasn't like that.
It's counterproductive.
That's why. It wasn't really like that, you know? It was, people were getting stuff done. It wasn't like you were in there. I was never in fear for my life when I was up there. I wasn't like, oh man, I hope this doesn't go bad or anything like that, you know? It was in fact, only one time up here we had something that was weird, you know? But nothing up there. It was like I was really surprised that it wasn't like you'd envision it. It wasn't like the story said. You know, it was a little funny. It was crazy because it was like you'd get used to working with a lot of people in the room. It was like, you know, I remember mixed sessions where there were like 40 people in the control room, in this size control room right here. It was like they're gambling, throwing dice over there in the corner.
I hope everybody shut up while
You
you're
know,
at work.
yeah, I mean,
Was it loud?
I block it out. I can block out a lot of stuff, man. You know, when I get focused, I zoom right in, and you know, not to say that I don't hear whatever else is going on either, you know, because I'm so focused that I'm attuned to everything around me, you know what I mean? But no, it didn't throw me off, man, you know what I mean? I wouldn't let that throw me off. I could easily mix through those situations and still get good stuff. And, you know, if it got too much, the artist would usually say something, man, we trying to mix here, yo, you know, something, you know?
I heard that there was a lot of shuttling around, like suddenly somebody would come in and there would be a price.
This is a Jmix exclusive.
What up with shut up?